Great, good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Providence City Council Committee on Finance. It's the 30th of July, 2020. Good evening and welcome. Before we begin, we're going to start off with the roll call, right, Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk.
Chairman Iglesias.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Joanne Ryan. Castillo. Absent. Councilman Anthony is absent. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
You have 3 present, 2 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Also, let's take an opportunity once again to thank Mr. Clerk and Madam Clerk and the entire Clerk's office for working so hard during these difficult times. They've done a great job. They've been at City Hall every day during this whole process, and I want to thank them during all these the crises that we are living in right now. But I want to thank them. It's very important to note of that. Let the record reflect that Councilman Goncalves is present.
So noted.
Thank you. And I think we're going to start rolling with. I think we're gonna roll with the continuation of what happened on Tuesday's meeting, which was a continuing discussion on the bond initiative that was passed 2 years ago, which is approximately $160 million, and then the proposed new bond initiative, which is going before the City Council tomorrow night, I believe at 4:15, for approximately $140 million. As we spoke earlier, there's a time frame crunch. The issue here is that the traditional route would be that the resolution be submitted to the council, the resolution then gets submitted to the finance committee, and then we have a full public vetting, go back to the council, hopefully voted upon, then go to the Board of Canvassers, then go to the Secretary of State's office. The issue here is because of the timing problem, which is we have to have the Board of Canvassers meet, as we have to have the City Council review and approve, if they approve it on tomorrow, and have then sent to the Board of Canvassers, and they have to approve it and have to get to the Board of Elections, Secretary of State's office, by August 4th. So we're kind of doing a cart before the horse in a sense, in order to make sure there's enough, at least some public vetting, discussion, and transparency in the process to talk about what this proposal is that's on the docket tomorrow night. I'm going to reiterate again, as we all know, that if the council passes tomorrow night, and then it goes in the ballot, and the people of Providence vote yes to the $140 million school bond initiative, then the process still continues. Then there'll be a full-blown ordinance put together. It'll talk about how the money's being spent, how it's going to be spent, who's going to spend it, et cetera. And that process will be sent to the City Council, and then the council and the public will have an opportunity to get really down into the weeds and the specifics of how the money's going to be spent, where it's going to be spent, and for what purposes. So the council will then actually have an additional public vetting process in the near future, post-November, if the public approves it. So that's why we're raising the level of comfort that we're doing our best to give the public an opportunity to vote on in November, but also there'll be the appropriate public full disclosure and scrutiny post-November to the City Council process and the Finance Committee. I believe I described it correctly. Do we also have the City Solicitor on the line? I believe.
Hold on, sorry.
If you find them, it's great. And then we also have Ernie Almonte, our consultant, also here with us. We also have Deputy Majority Leader Harris present. Okay, great. So I'd like to take up the issue, or assuming the continuing discussion that we started on Tuesday, that we continued to this evening, to continue that conversation. I know Mr. Mancini and Ms. Day talked about deliverables and talked about different things that they were going to be able to provide and explain. So let the record reflect also that Attorney General Gina Costa is present. So thank you. So why don't we start with swearing Mr. Mancini and Ms. Day. Are you two the ones going to talk about the bond stuff at this time?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Clerk, Madam Clerk, can you swear the two individuals in?
Could you please
Is Ms. Lindbergh going to be speaking to? Why don't you raise your hand? Go ahead. Jump in the pool. Come on, it's fine.
Raise your right hand. Do you please say aye? Yes, I do. After I say this, do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Jordan Day, Senior Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the City of Providence.
Krista Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director for the City of Providence.
Great. All right. So I think last time we spoke on Tuesday, there was conversation about the 160, where we are. You had some more you had specifics, Ms. Day, on your computer, but it didn't make sense to just put your computer screen up to another computer screen so we all could see it. So I believe you forwarded the information to the internal auditor. Is that correct? And Mr. Almonte, and you guys had conversations. And then can you elaborate about that conversation? And I'll have the internal auditor, Mr. Almonte, weigh in also. Or Mr. Messina, who wants to speak first.
So there are three documents.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Ms. Day. We have worked with your internal auditor. We have shared documents that the committee requested, and she has prepared a memorandum that she has forwarded to all members of the council, and we did update any potential bond borrowing under the original $160 million voter approval that was granted 2 years ago. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I will respectfully defer to my colleague, Jordan Day.
So there were three documents that were shared with the clerk for items around discussion for tonight. I don't know if those need to be admitted into the record before we begin.
Do we have them, Mr. Clerk?
We're preparing those right now.
Mr. Clerk is preparing them. While he's preparing, let the record reflect that Councilman Pedro Espinal is with us. Ms. Day, why don't you just start going with, once he has the documents prepared, then we can enter them into the record accordingly. So which document do you want us to look at first, Ms. Day?
So my recommendation would be to start with the school capital plan financing and project memo that I worked together with Chief Mancini as well as other members of our team to put together. It outlines and provides a summary of the financing for these projects. There's a table in there that would indicate the bonding that's associated with each step of this, and the table has some specific identifying information that will be really helpful, I think, for counselors as they're looking to make decisions. There's also an explanation regarding the pay-as-you-go state bond funds, which will explain what we were currently approved for, what we think we're potentially eligible for, and what we have already spent at this time. Noting that we were approved for $48.9 million worth of pay-go funds. And so at this time, we've actually only spent $1.16 million, but I anticipate that more will be spent shortly. And it also gave you some general guidelines around project determination, what were the focus areas, what guidelines we utilized, and why we utilized them. A lot of that leans into our eligibility for reimbursement bonuses in order to ensure that we can get as many bonuses as possible on as many projects as possible. So that document is something that the clerk will share with the group momentarily, but I also sent via email about 20 to 30 minutes ago. As an attachment onto that memo, there's also the state's approval that is available on their website outlining what every single LEA is eligible for pay-go funds. Additionally, there is a school capital plan project list. And that project list outlines what falls under the $160 million, what falls under the $140 million. I do note that that is still a working document. And so there may be some minor changes, but this is pretty close to final. There may be, and I'm happy to come back before the body and provide additional updates as we get closer to finalizing the list, but it's pretty close to final at this point. And it outlines the facilities, the investments in each of the 7 capital project categories, if one of those categories is being fulfilled, and the amount for each one of those categories. As mentioned before, those categories are the reasons that we're identifying bonuses through our reimbursement application. So we'll be able to identify up to 2, for most of those projects, we'll at least have 1 bonus. We may have up to 2 in certain areas. The last document is the debt service projections that I think Larry would be best suited to speak about because that is his forte, not mine. And it just outlines that we do have the capacity and we are able to execute on this bond as well as the bond that has already been authorized.
Why don't we do this very quickly? Just, I think there's 3 documents, right? There's one document addressed to the council members from Jordan Day, Senior Deputy Chief Operating Officer, dated July 30th, 2020. It's a 2-page document. And let's enter that into the record as Exhibit 1, I guess.
So moved.
Well, is that one by Vice Chair, second by discussion in favor, aye. Just wait a second. All right. Number 2, can we enter into the record? A second, I will. Into the record, we'll identify it as Exhibit 2 to our discussion. It's a back-to-back document. It's called a working document dated 7/29/2020. School capital plan project list. Entered as Exhibit 2. Have a motion for that?
So moved.
Vice Chair, second, Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor, aye. Next, we have a last exhibit identified as Exhibit 3. City of Providence projected debt service on current $160 million school authorization dated July 30th, 2020. Assumptions and et cetera. Has a running list. We'll identify as Exhibit 3.
So moved.
All right, Vice Chair, second. Discussion, all in favor, aye. So let's start off with this. Does any committee members have any questions about, I think Ms. Day was referencing Exhibit 1 and 2. Have any questions on the laundry list that she provided?
No.
Mr. Councilman Taylor? All right.
No,
Gina, right, Ms. Internal Auditor, Mr. Almonte, have you reviewed these documents?
Yes, I have.
All right, and do you have any input or any insights?
Nope. I have no objection to it. The projects are identified. The funding is proper. They have made sure that any future funding available is available. Drop-off is happening, so the city is able to afford them.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Ernie. I agree with those comments as well.
Thank you, Mr. Almonte. All right. So, Mr. Mancini, do you want to lead us down on, it looks like Exhibit 3, which is the current City of Providence projected current $160 million school authorization, Exhibit 3. You want to take us through that real quick, sir?
I will. Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, members of the council. As Ms. Day has already presented and has alluded to and referred to, the document labeled Exhibit 3 was prepared by Hilltop Securities as the city's fiscal advisor. Mr. Chairman, it's meant to show the committee that the ability to borrow in terms of long-term bond borrowing would be $110 million of the $160 million that was granted by the voters 2 years ago. That difference of $50 million, that $50 million will be handled what's known as pay-go. Consistent with the borrowing that was done by the state 2 years ago, there is an abundance of bond funds that are available to LEAs, and this becomes a condition of accessing those funds. The SBA and Rhode has made that condition precedent to all LEAs, all municipal communities, to take their funds both at bond authority as well as pay-go. So the city of Providence will receive $50 million in pay-go. Our match on that is approximately $10 million. We will earn that $10 million, as has been outlined in this document, through bond premium at approximately 10% on the $110 million bond issue. On that $110 million bond issue, that could be taken anytime post-July 1, with first full payment due in FY22, not FY21. That first full year will be $9,150,000 of debt service at the city's repayment rate of 18 cents on the dollar. That would be a budget impact of $1.6 million, and there is $2.9 million in debt service drop-off occurring in February of 22, sufficient to cover the replacement of that drop-off, if you will, so that we are in a similar debt service position or better. With that, this model was priced at an interest rate today of 4%. which I think is still modeled high given the current low interest environment conditions. But our outside advisors took that number as a conservative average of what it might be to close on a municipal bond anytime post July 1. That basically surmises what's available to the city. And so I am available for any questions that the committee may have, and you have the document before you.
Any questions by committee members?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Let the record reflect that Councilwoman Kerwin is present. Internal Order, do you have any view, statement, or comment on Exhibit 3, or Ms. Almonte, or both?
I have no comment.
Ms. Almonte?
I'm in agreement with those comments as well, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So, Mr. Mancini, overall, the debt, existing debt service for the city of Providence, not just including, this is just school debt. Do we got overall? Do you have a chart for the entire outstanding debt service of the city of Providence?
I do, and I have provided that previously to the city internal auditor last week. I don't believe it was included in the packet that was submitted this evening, as we were focusing only on school bond. But we have provided both non-school, which is non-reimbursable naturally, and and school bonding capacity, and we have provided that document. This supports us that we are well within our bond capacity ability, as well as a budgetary decision to stay at as close as we can to the current budget debt service.
Mr. Mancini, what determines the city of Providence's bond debt capacity? What elements?
It's based on, depending upon how we borrow, Mr. Chairman. If we're borrowing under general obligation, it's no greater than 3% of the city's budget. No greater than 3% of the city's tax levy, taxable properties. And if we were borrowing under the Public Building Authority, it's no greater than 50% at any one time of the city budget. This particular issue will be a general obligation issue, as that authority was granted 2 years ago, and it falls within the 3% maximum limit.
Okay. Madam Internal Order, is that correct?
Yes, I do have those documents. If anyone would like them, I can forward them to you. He did provide them.
All right, great, thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions on these items at this time, committee members?
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair?
just that we'd like those documents circulated to the committee at least.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just
Ms.
note that
Jordan?
I
Ms.
emailed all of those documents to every council member earlier today, and I believe the clerk has the consolidated records, unless you're only speaking about the debt capacity models, leader.
Speaking about the documents that were referenced by Mr. Mancini. Thank you.
Will do.
Any further comments, questions by committee members? Council members? All right. Let the record reflect the President Sabina Matos is present also.
So noted.
All right. So then let us, and Councilman LaFortune has joined us also.
So noted.
So with that, then we'll move on to the next items on the docket. Ms. Mancini, Ms. Jordan, thank you. I'm sure we're going to be having further conversations about this. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
please keep the internal auditor and treasurer and city's council's financial team updated with real-time information and how this proceeds. Also, Rhode has Rhode approved the upcoming $140 million requested bond?
So that would...
It has been approved. The authority that has been granted to seek proper reimbursement has been provided, yes.
Okay. Vice Chair, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Relative to the school capital plan project list that was approved a couple of years ago for the 160, what is the status of that? Have these projects begun? They completed? What's the status?
So I had touched on this on Tuesday, and I know you weren't able to join us later, so I will go over those points for you. So the 160 million, the total amount there is reduced by our pay-go allocation, which is 48.9 million. At this time, we have not borrowed the 100 or 110 million that is needed to complete those projects at this time. The 2019 MOA for school construction is funded at approved $278 million worth of capital projects. And so this 140 million will facilitate the completion of all the projects that are outlined there, in addition to any other increases in student-centric innovations or into any high-impact visual enhancements as to increase our bonus eligibility. Beyond that, the $20 million bond that the council approved in 2019 was used to begin work on projects that were approved as part of the 2019 MOA. And so I don't have the specific projects listed in the memo, but I will be able to provide that information. But there are projects that have begun at this time. And so we've used PAYGO as a source of funding, but the city has its own obligation for our commitment into fulfilling what that total approval was for. And so we've done about $1.16 million worth of work that has been billed to PAYGO. The rest has been billed to the city at this time.
Okay, I appreciate that you're talking about PAYGO and dollars and cents. What my question specifically is, how many of these projects that are on this bonded list that we authorized the approval of, or the voters authorized borrowing on, have started?
So I can give you the list. I don't have.
There's allocations associated with a number of projects. I know in my own ward, there's projects that we've been waiting for that are critical, they're urgent. I've got leaky roofs, I've got buckets under the leaky roofs. There's money allocated. I understand, just take one of them, Pleasant View. Gilbane was on scene back in October, defining the work to be done. The funds were allocated, but no work has been done since October. So when is that going to be completed, bid out, whatever? What's the status of that one particularly?
That project is in design at this time and is expected to be completed by December of 2022. There's many categories of the project that will be done through that span of time, but it is currently in design. I know that Gilbane was out back in last October. Of course, folks here know that in November 2019, Rhode and the district, the relationship between these entities changed. And so over the last 8 months or so, we've been in discussions just making sure that we're optimizing our opportunities and increasing all of our efforts to making sure that our students are successful in the classroom spaces and making sure that our capital improvements align with that philosophy and the turnaround plan. So there's been some discussions about what work will continue to move forward. So, and we had some contractual matters that we were working on until about mid-April. And so since then, we've given notice to proceed. Design is beginning on many of these projects. Some projects, as I mentioned, were funded through the $20 million bond and are underway. I will be happy to share a full list with the council shortly after this. I just don't have the full list in front of me at this moment.
Well, thank you for that answer, Jordan. My concern is that this particular situation with the roof, I understand it's a $2-point-something million problem. It's been talked about, it's been put off for multi-years. I know when these funds were asked for, I was promised that it was going to be a priority, it was going to be done expeditiously. The school is expecting it to have been done. And now you're telling me that there's the possibility that it's going to be pushed out to 2022. I just want to remind you, Jordan, and maybe you were not aware, but the roof, the ceiling panels are soaking wet when there's rain. There's a problem with the roof. It's like a sieve in there when there's rain. The panels that were so blackened by water and mold were removed, and they put grates in as a Band-Aid so that the water could drip through the ceiling tiles so that they didn't lose the ceiling tiles in a bad rainstorm. So it's unacceptable to me that this project work hasn't been completed. And I have to answer the questions of why to teachers and parents of those school children. So I don't understand what the delay in the project is. So I'm looking forward to a complete summary of the project plans on that school and anything else in my ward.
Leader, just as a point of clarification, it's expected that that project would be substantially completed by December of 2022. So that project is in design now and will be in construction over the next several months.
Excuse me,
and so
Ms.
we'll
Day,
begin
Ms.
addressing
Day.
those issues.
Ms. Day, that was defined as an emergent need 2 years ago. It's unacceptable to me that we're now pushing it out until 2022. I'd like you to look at the project, look at the severity of the matter. You have the money approved. I don't understand why it keeps getting pushed back. It was part of the
I'll be happy to
capital-
talk to you
it was
offline about
part of
that.
the
I'm happy
capital
to talk to you about the
It
schedule.
was part of the capital improvement plan, and it was taken out of that and put into this school bonding. It's a
I
concern
wasn't
for me.
involved in those discussions, so I can't speak to what those decisions were. I can say that I am happy to talk to you offline more about the schedule, and I will have our team come meet with you to talk about it.
Thank you, Ms. Day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any further comments or questions on this matter? Okay. Vice Chair, can you close your hand or could the hand? All right, so let's continue on. Thank you, Ms. Day. Follow up with the Vice Chair and everybody who has concerns. And then thank you, Mr. Mancini. Next up, can we have a
Thank you,
motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to continue items 1, 2, and 3 for the next council meeting?
So moved.
Vice Chair, Councilman Taylor makes that motion. Second by Vice
Second.
Chair Ryan, discussion, all in favor, aye. Next, item number 4, Madam Clerk.
Discussion related to the possibility of a Providence school.
We've been, as you know, the Finance Committee has been reviewing, actually, doing a fact-finding mission concerning the idea of having the City of Providence create an emergency social service unit, or however you want to call it. We've actually had great dialogue from some entities that have done it in the past and are doing it today. We've had the Cahoots organization, STARS, and et cetera. Also, presently right now, for the past many years, the City of Providence, actually, Police Department has been working with numerous homegrown and local social service agencies in the state of Rhode Island and the City of Providence, actually doing, from what we're hearing, a lot of this kind of work. And so we thought it was important to continue to expand the conversation, continue to find out how that's been going, what are the pros, what's the cons, how is it, is there things to maybe, should we go to look towards to expanding those programs, and et cetera, et cetera. So we thought it was important, the committee and of course myself, to bring in those organizations and let's learn about it. It's an opportunity for the organization to brag about what's going on, and also what the pitfalls are too. But I gather there's a lot of organizations, some of these organizations have been working with the police department for many years, and we know a lot of those organizations, and it'd be great to hear what's going on. I know we have we're starting tonight with 2 of the organizations, I believe it's almost like 10 of them, that actually interact with the police department on this, basically providing social services instead of police presence. This evening, we're lucky to have 2 institutions I know we all know. The Institute for Nonviolence Institute. We have Cedric Huntley, and then we also have Family Services RI. We have Sarah Kelly Palmer and Margaret Holland McDuff. And I know we've all spoken to them over the past. I know I have, and we've heard a lot of good work that they've done, not necessarily just with the police department, but just what they normally do anyway, what their mission statement. So what I would do is, if it's okay, if I could take we'll go with Family Services, I guess, or who would like to go first? Nonviolence Institute or Family Services?
We'll take Family Services. Family
Great.
Services.
All right, so what I'd like you to do is, if, we'll have you sworn in, and can you give us a little understanding, like, you know, what the mission statement of Family Services is? What does it do? How does it interact with City of Providence? How does it interact with the police department, or any other departments? And, because I think a lot of council members, and there's a lot of new council members, and there's some old ones, don't even know about the vast interaction of a lot of these agencies that are in the City of Providence and in the state of Rhode Island that really work hand in hand with numerous departments in the city. So we thought it was important to kind of get a little understanding of it. I think also I want to mention that we also have Ellen Sinar, and she's going to also give us an update on where she is on administration on this venture, this idea of creating some kind of emergency social service unit and response unit, whatever you want to call it, whatever acronym eventually fits the best for the City of Providence. And I know we've had her several times for the past couple of months, and she's been talking about how the administration has been working on this project and looking towards and how it can work, how it cannot, you know, what to do to make it a right size for the City of Providence, how to create something that what the community is looking for, hopefully to address community needs. So I'm excited to hear from her and what her update is at. So why don't we start with swearing, I guess, the folks in Family Service from Institute for Nonviolence, and of course, Ms. Sinar, and then we can start with the Family Services. All right. So, Mr. Clerk, please swear them in, please.
Ms. Sinar, Ms. Kelly Palmer, Ms. Holland McDuff, and Mr. Huntley, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
I do.
Could the members from Family Service RI please just state your names and titles real quick?
Margaret Holland McDuff, CEO of Family Service of Rhode Island.
Sarah Kelly Palmer, Vice President at Family Service of Rhode Island.
And Cedric Huntley, the Interim Executive Director of the Nonviolence Institute.
And Ms. Sinar.
My name is Ellen Sinar. I'm the director of the Healthy Communities Office for the City of Providence.
Well, welcome everybody, by the way. Thank you for participating, and thank you for having this conversation with the City of Providence City Council Finance Committee and my colleagues and of course the public. So, Family Services, who would like to go from there and just a little, talk a little background about the Family Services and all that good stuff if you could, all right? And then tell us how it interacts with the City of Providence and Police Department and what services are provided and how is that going? Right, so you have the mic. Who would like to go first?
Sure, I can start, and I don't know, we have some slides that we were going to share with everyone, and I don't know if that's possible to do that.
Yes.
Mr. Clerk is trying to do it, I think.
I have those, and first I'm just going to show everyone real quick. This is on the published document. On the published document for our agendas, we always put at the top of the Finance Committee agendas this link. So I'm sorry, I know you can't click on it from your screens in Zoom, but it's just a bit.ly link with DVD 2021-budget, and there you'll find all the documents that we were presenting tonight, as well as the one that Family Services RI is just about to show. So I'm going to share that screen, and which of you would like the mouse control from Family Service RI?
Let's give that to Sarah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I do think it's terrific that you're having the Institute and Family Service of Rhode Island come to present together because we were the first agencies that really started working in partnership with the Providence Police 15 years ago. I still remember the first time I sat down with the new chief and the mayor and then Tenny Gross of the Institute and talked about how we could do things differently. I also remember the first command staff meetings. I remember having a police radio in my home to make sure that we responded to calls and we coordinated between the two agencies. So to have it come first, I think it's a real honor, but also I think it's also very appropriate. So this is the mission of Family Service of Rhode Island, to advance equity, opportunity, and hope in our communities. And you'll see the 4 departments that we have divided our work into: healing, health, hope, and homes. We really feel that to advance equity is the most important part of our work, and that everything that we do, our work with families, our work with individuals, our work with people that are suffering from diabetes, to families that we respond to with the police, to children that we work with in the schools, all should be through the lens of equity to make sure that people have successful, economically stable, and happy lives. So that's how we're going to talk about our GO team and how that developed. So this is Family Service of Rhode Island's clients in Providence. We work with thousands and thousands of families every year in Providence. But these are the percentages that I thought everyone would find interesting, and where a lot of our work is concentrated in certain neighborhoods. And we know that where poverty concentrations are in Providence as well, and they mirror up. So we're always looking to help families as much as we can. And one place is the GO team, which Sarah's going to talk about in a few minutes. But our GO team last year in 2019 impacted over 1,000 Providence residents. Also more recently, and I thought people would find interesting, during COVID-19, Family Service of Rhode Island developed a Be Safe program. We recognized in early March that a lot of our families would not have the resources to get the cleaning products, to afford masks that they could have, to have gloves, to keep their families safe. So we started to put together Be Safe kits for a lot of our families in Providence, and just delivered those. It started through the grassroots effort of volunteers and some staff members. It grew from there when families really identified they also needed food. So now we've delivered to over 10,000 families in Providence, both food deliveries as well as safety products. And more recently, in the last month, we've added crisis counseling to that service, because we found that so many of those families that we delivered to also had other stressors, whether it was domestic violence, a lot of anxiety due to COVID, housing issues, loss of their income. And so we've added crisis counseling, and we've served thousands of folks with that as well. And some of those families have access to longer term services with us or with some of our partners. And then we can go on to the next slide. So, and then I'll just start, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. So in 2004, we worked with, as I said, Mayor Cicilline and his leadership team, and the leadership of the Providence Police, as well as a critical partner in the Institute, and developed the GO team. And we're really proud of the work that we've done in the last 15 years to develop that. It's become a unique model, and it's sought after across not only the country, but internationally. We've been asked to train at so many different places, including Orlando, Florida, Wilmington, Delaware, Charleston, South Carolina, including also Hull, England, and Santiago, Chile. So there's so many folks that have heard about it, from Attorney General's offices, police departments, social service agencies, about the impact that it can have on victims, families, communities, and also the culture of policing. So we've been really proud of the work, and really proud of our partnership too with the Institute. And so I'll let Sarah talk a little bit more about the details of the model.
Sure. So our model started, as Margaret said, in 2004. And originally we were partnering with the Providence Police to respond to children exposed to violence. And we were replicating something called Child Development Community Policing that was created at the Yale Child Study Center. Very, very quickly, we, the police and us, identified that there were so many more people in need beyond the original scope of children exposed to violence. So we quickly just started responding to any call or need that the police requested us to be at. So our GO team model looks like this. We have full and part-time trauma-trained, what we call police liaisons, and they come from a variety of social work backgrounds, criminal justice backgrounds, and they are trained. And we also have a team of on-call responders who are available in addition to our regular salaried employees 24/7. And they're able to respond on scene in Providence within 15 to 30 minutes, anytime, day or night. Our police liaisons co-locate at the Providence Police Department, riding along on patrol, responding to calls that involve individuals who have been victimized, who are experiencing mental health or substance abuse crises, housing or homelessness crises, and a wide range of other social problems. We've always wanted to continue to expand this model, and ideally, I think we would love to have a police liaison co-located in every community substation, but funding, has been a barrier to that. But we have worked really hard to form a trusting relationship with the Providence Police, and we are able to respond citywide. So even if one of our police liaisons is riding in one district, if there's a call for service, such as a domestic violence call, a homicide, or perhaps it's just a teenager who's having difficulty at home and acting out, our liaison can cross districts citywide. We respond in partnership with the Providence Police, and we do provide crisis assessment, intervention and counseling, language support, and linkage with community resources. And we respond to individuals across the lifespan. Many times it's to child or elder abuse, domestic violence, as I mentioned, and victims of homicide. We are often providing support and comfort to individuals during some of the worst times in their life. Many individuals and families who we encounter are struggling to meet their basic needs and are almost always impacted by some form of trauma. So the overall goal of our program is to intervene to help to break the cycle of violence and trauma and to assist with the basic needs and social determinants of health to ensure that all residents in the city of Providence can have access to the services and resources necessary to lead healthy lives. In addition to providing the direct service, we also provide some service to the police department in the form of trauma-informed training. And we do that for the police command staff as well as the new recruits so that they're aware of our approach and that they can fully utilize the program and they know who we are. If you ever do a ride along in the city of Providence, you might hear on the radio is family service riding. So officers know throughout the city that if they come across a situation that they need a social service or mental health assistance with, they can call upon us. That worked. So talking about the successes and barriers, we would also love more money to collect more outcomes about our program, but the outcomes that we do have, we've had really positive feedback about our model and have found that we've been able to advocate for and help victims participate in the criminal justice system in a way that makes them feel more comfortable and in a way that makes them feel heard. As a result of the inequities that exist throughout our criminal justice system and the implicit bias that often occurs, we know that many individuals and many communities often have a mistrust of law enforcement and have had negative interactions. So having a police liaison available immediately on scene to assist in a time of crisis can be impactful on so many levels. And from some of the satisfaction surveys that we have conducted in our data, we've shown that individuals we served and families have been satisfied with our services, which is always a good thing. But really another gain or secondary gain we've seen is that this program has contributed to building more trust between the individuals served and the police. So many people who have been served have reported a more positive opinion of the police as a result of the help that they've received, and have also reported that they would be more likely to call the police in the future. And Margaret mentioned that we've trained nationally and internationally and have also received several awards for our work. We're hearing a lot of people talk about expanding and the need out there in Providence and our community. And we really think that the infrastructure and partnerships we've built could really be an asset to the conversation that's happening and to the service array in Providence. We've had such success with our Go Team model that expanding this model to situations before the police need to get involved or for all the hundreds of situations we respond to that really don't need a police intervention could be very impactful for the city of Providence. We know that when a crisis occurs, even if it has nothing to do with a law being broken, 911 is really the only place people feel they have to turn. So a proposed expansion of this model could be that a 911 call comes in, and if it's triage not needing a police intervention, we could send a team of responders to respond without the police. So instead of the police being dispatched, a mobile social service team is dispatched instead to do many of the same services I just spoke about that we already do. We know that so many behavioral health crises are exacerbated because an individual or a family's basic needs are not being met, or people are living in circumstances that are abusive or traumatic. And we know that trauma is at the heart of so much negativity that impacts children, families, and individuals. I can think of countless examples where we have responded in our GO team in partnership with the police to situations that did not need a police intervention. They just needed a trauma-informed social service response. A few examples: we responded with the police to a woman who was homeless with, I believe it was 2 children, who was riding the RIPTA bus for shelter because she had no other place to go. We responded and helped get her into a family shelter. Another recent example is an elderly woman who is living in squalor with dementia. We helped get her to the hospital and get follow-up services. To a teenager who was acting out at home and his parents didn't know where to turn because of his mental health and trauma history, we got him intensive home-based behavioral services and prevented DCYF from becoming involved. The police responded with us on all of those calls because that's our model and that's our funding. But I could envision a program where the police don't have to respond to those calls because we could have a mobile crisis social intervention team. So we really believe that expanding a model like this can make a great impact on this city and really could assist in addressing those barriers to access to services and the inequities that exist. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Margaret, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else if I missed it.
Well, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned. I mean, Chairman, you asked for pitfalls, but I'd say there's lessons learned, and I think the most, and I don't want to take too much of Cedric's time, and I think that he might agree too, but one of the things that we really learned is that it takes so much time and effort to build the working partnership with the police. We've learned from so many municipalities that have tried to put similar projects and get them off the ground, and that they can't get the responses from the police. They can't get the police to call them to on call, to work in collaboration. And it did take time with us, the police. I still remember why I had the police radio at home on my kitchen counter for the first 6 months was there was a captain that said, this is going to end. You're going to get disinterested. You're going to come out to a call on a homicide and you're going to say, we're not doing this. We're not coming at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, we are going to be there. This is our mission. We need to provide these services to the people that need them in the community. And we were there, and we had to really win the trust and the credibility of so many of them, and to do that in partnership, because there's so many calls, like Sarah said, that we could go on alone, but there's many calls that we do need to do in partnership with the police still. So I'd say that's building the trust is one lesson learned. It takes time, and it's a real asset that Providence has now.
All right. Any comments or questions by committee members? Council members? Right, so then I'm gonna let, okay. Sorry, Vice Chair Ryan, then Deputy Majority Leader Mary Kay, and Councilman Espinal.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. That was very interesting. I just had a couple of questions. How frequently do you meet with the police? I get a sense that you just stress the importance of a partnership and nurturing the partnership, and you do training for the police. How frequently do you debrief with the police or meet with the police?
Well, our staff attends a roll call on a daily basis. So they're at roll call. We also attend weekly command staff meeting. as well as, and Sarah can speak to this, before COVID, we were doing debriefings on cases at Family Service, and the police were invited to come. So it's a daily, I mean, it's with our police liaison staff, it's daily, there's meetings.
Yeah,
And
they're,
Sarah,
they're co-located at the safety complex. So they have desks, they wear 2 badges. They have a family service badge, but they also have a Providence police badge. So they have space there, and so they're there daily. Yes. Is the
Interesting.
question.
How big is your staff?
So we have, not to get too in the weeds, 2 full-time police liaisons who are salaried that are there regularly, and then 1 part-time who does kind of more of the night shift. And then we have an on-call team. So they're just on call 1 week at a time. And right now there are 3 of those currently, and we're recruiting another, but yes.
So you run very lean. That's not a lot of staff.
Not a lot of staff. We serve a lot of people with a very small dedicated team. And backing that team up though is a whole host of other services at Family Service that really make this. So the GO team does that immediate crisis intervention, but then we're able to hook them up with services either at Family Service or community partners. So we really have a good system of backup so they can get immediate trauma counseling. Our FCCP program is a prevention program for families. We have a whole host of other services that we can immediately connect them to. So that helps.
So you almost do the triage, and if additional long-term services are needed, you rely on a network of service providers.
Yes, correct. And
that's
yes.
very interesting. And how are you paid?
Yes, we are mainly funded. Our biggest funder is the Victim of Crime Act, VOCA dollars that come through from the federal government to the state. And we also receive CDBG funding. Thank you very much. And we also work really hard to get private donations and grants. But our biggest funder is the Victim of Crime Act.
I will say, Majority Leader, I'd just like to add to that there has been a real dedication from our team as well as our board of directors around this program, because for 15 years we've really had to cobble together both trying to get federal grants from philanthropy, lots of private donations. We have a few individuals that have been very committed to the program. We've had gaps in funding, and our board has been committed and kept it going because it was that important of a service to the community. Our vision really initially was that we would love to have a social worker and a police liaison in every district, every police district, and riding along for that district. Our only barrier, and going back to the pitfall, is being able to have the resources to be able to do that.
So just 2 questions more, Mr. Chair, so others can ask questions and we can continue. Do you draft the applications for the state funding? Is it a grant application that you pursue every year?
Yes, we have to pursue it every year. It's competitive, and we don't know if we're going to get it every year.
Wow. Okay. So that, kind of, you have to wonder if you're going to get it and how that's going to affect your operation. So that must be a big concern.
Yes.
And then if you could operate on, as you suggest, your natural expansion is to have a police officer, a police district covered by one of your staffers. So dedicate a staff to a police unit or district or whatever. How much of an increase? Is that a 50% budget increase? Is that how big of an increase for you to serve the need? And obviously you've been doing this since 2004, so you must have a sense of what the need is. If you were to expand to address the need that you perceive, what would that look like in relationship to a dollar cost? Do you have that? And if you don't, that's fine. But is it a 50% increase? Is it an 80% increase? Just generally speaking.
It's closer to an 80% increase if we were going to cover the whole city with the level of services that we would want to provide in interventions, and making sure that we're getting to all those families in every district.
Okay, and then I'm going to press you. What is the cost of running your operation right now, as it is?
Well, the budget right now is $180,000. $37,000 is from Community Development Block Grant. The rest that we are able to get from our VOCA funding as well as individual donations and matches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your answers and your presentation. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Deputy Majority Leader Harris?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And congratulations for your years, 15 years of activities and community building. I'm excited about hearing the fact that you do have that strong partnership. You're right. It's so hard for us to build trust among us in the city. And your overlap with the Nonviolence Institute. Welcome back, Cedric. Last time I seen you, I told you you'll be back. See?
Yeah.
And you're back.
You.
Welcome back. We need you.
Thank you.
Time. Thank you. So, and your relationship with the Nonviolence Institute seems like there is some great partnership already, like the Nonviolent Institute and Family Service Institute. I guess my question would be, what is that relationship? Do you both ride with the police? I mean, there's young people I know the Nonviolent Institute interact with. And do you call them in? At what point do you think you need them? How's that relationship? Second, you mentioned the substations, which is very interesting. It seems like that's the best place to be. I think Leader Ryan sort of touched a little bit on that about the district policing and areas like that. So I want to know a little bit more about that. What do you foresee with that? Because I think that is an interesting concept of how we really reach people, especially with the district police as they are in those substations, right in the community.
Maybe I'll start with the substations and then I can talk about the Institute and hand it over to Cedric. But many years ago.
One more. Oh, forget it. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Many years ago, when within our first two to 3 years, we did have some time in some of the substations, including the one on Chalkstone Avenue, the one on River Avenue. There was one on Brook Street that we're in, and we spent certain days in different districts. We never had enough to cover all of the districts, but we would cover different pieces. When funding was going up and down, depending if we had a federal grant, which sometimes are much larger sources of revenue, we had to basically consolidate and centralize at the safety complex and then have our liaisons ride along with the police and that all the different districts know that they're riding along. Ideally, our vision was that we would be in the substations to develop really community-based relationships with those neighbors, with those community members. We're still doing that. We have a lot of staff that we've sustained for many, many years. So they have some of those natural relationships, but it would be an improvement, we believe, if we were able to be out in the community more. And then two, with the Institute, we do some similar things. We do very different things. We work with families with a very similar eye to equity and understanding where their needs are, and that a full array of services are really needed and not just one thing, substance abuse or mental health or just basic needs. It's the full array of services. Where we're able to really partner with the Institute is around families where there's really high violence, certainly where there's gang involvement. And that's where the Institute really picks up and is able to work with those families in a really intensive way. And some families have pre-existing relationships with the Institute. And we quickly, if we're called for that call, we quickly work to get them hooked up with the Institute immediately as well. So, and there's probably a ton of other examples Sarah and the staff could give, but I'll hand it over to Cedric and he can speak to it too.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you to the chair and all the council members. I don't have a presentation as like Family Services. I was just called today to be a part of this meeting. So I would like an opportunity to come back and present, some data, some very strong data to you as well. But I could speak on the partnerships and the trust that's needed for organizations like Family Services and the Nonviolence Institute to do the important work and making those connections. So that partnership with the police has always, we've grown that and we've strengthened it. And I think we've work well with family services. Our main mission is to work with the community around nonviolence training, responding to violence in our community and outside of our community. Training, we do victim services, and we do outreach. And so I can just stress the importance of the work and building on top of the partnerships that we have to just strengthen them more. The things that are going on into today's time put stresses on all of us, but we're committed to the work. We work with Lifespan, we do advocacy, and we've been doing it for the last 18 to 20 years or so, when Sister Ann and Father Ray began to address the violence in our community. So I would like just an opportunity to come back and further give you details on the data and what's the Institute has been doing over the years, and appreciate your time. But I'm not prepared, as I was called by the clerk today to be involved in this meeting, and I wasn't aware of what the meeting was about. So kudos to Family Services, and I hope that we will continue our partnership as well.
Mr. Hunley, from behalf of the community, we apologize for the late notice. We also want to thank you, by the way, for willing to still participate. And of course, we definitely would have you back. As you know, your organization has been part of the city of Providence's landscape for, you just mentioned, a very long time. So first of all, it's always been welcome, at least in my committee, and I know I'm sure at the council chambers. So we will definitely going to bring you back, because this is a continuing conversation. Okay. And the idea is we're on a listening and learning tour to figure out what works best, how do we right-size things, and so that's what we're trying to achieve here. So, and we can't do it without you. We can't do it without anybody on the screen. We can't do it unless we all do it together. It's not going to happen. That's the bottom line. So okay. I want you to know that I appreciate that you're willing to come on, but we're going to bring you back. Don't worry. Okay. And we want to see your slides. We want to hear the stories. We want to hear the successes. We want to hear even the failures, the things that we can help to help you help our constituents. So I want you to know that's where I'm coming from, and I think I can confidently say I believe that's where my council colleagues probably are coming from too. So. Okay. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And
so don't leave yet.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna leave. So I just wanted to also say that the history of that relationship, I've sat in another capacity around the table at the command staff with Margaret, and it's really been a plus for the city to really engage and to be engaged in those meetings and create those partnerships. So thank you, Margaret.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair. May I have one more, just one more, and it'll be quick.
Then Councilman Espinal. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'll be really quick. Just one more. The family service, you mentioned that you also handle like trauma and the things that definitely pull the rug off under you sometime. Right now, with the situation that's happening and the call for police accountability from around the country and the spotlight on police, have you had the opportunity to do any of that right now with the police under the circumstances after George Floyd's death? Any counseling trauma for the police? you said that you've been able to provide some for them. So is this a time that's happening right now? Can you talk to us about that?
That's for Margaret or, yeah.
For Margaret or,
I think I'll answer it and then I'll hand it over to Sarah too. Because of COVID.
Margaret or Sarah?
Yes, because of COVID, some of our training, our traditional training has decreased a bit. So we've certainly had a lot of discussions around what are the changes that we need to have. But we, as far as the academy and ongoing training is really around the trauma lens for police department. And I will say the culture has changed dramatically. And we have heard over and over again, and we can give you examples, or we can ask officers to come forward, the difference that it's made in their life and how they present themselves as a police officer, to understand the impact, the long-term health and economic impact on children, especially that witness violence and trauma, and that they said that they, went to different scenes and they would arrest the bad guy, and then they would just take them out and not think about that family that they left behind, not that 3-year-old, the 7-year-old that wouldn't, get up from under the bed, and variety of things. And they just are so much more informed now that they can't leave the scenes around, and making sure that those families are linked up with services and then checking on them later. So is everything perfect? No, but, and we certainly, and the Colonel and I talk almost every day. We still have so much more to do, but certainly it's made a huge difference from what I've seen where the police department was 15 years ago, how the academy was handled, how the command staff was handled, how roll call is handled, how we can have a voice when we say, even when we find out, why weren't we called? We heard about this situation. We should have been called. We're at the filming the next day. We should have been there that night. There's an accountability that they say, you're right, we were wrong, we should have called you, and we're going to find out why you weren't called and why you weren't on that scene. So most recently though, Sarah, I'm not sure if we've been able to do much training right now around George Floyd, and but certainly this is a critical time, I think, an opportunity to take action though too. So thanks for that question.
And I just want to add real quickly, we've seen also behavior change. So a concrete example of that would be if the police are planning to do a drug raid or intervene, in a narcotics situation, before they do that, they try to find out if there are children around or children in that family, and they call us before they even do an intervention. So to me, that's the police thinking ahead about what the impact of that narcotics raid or that situation is going to have on those children. And it's changed their behavior. And like Margaret said, there's still work to be done. But I really think that this trauma lens that we try to model, that we train on, but responding in partnership, we're able to model this trauma lens and model a compassionate presence and model, a different way to interact with people. We aren't the police, of course, but that has, I think, impacted the culture at the Providence Police Department for sure. Yes.
What about internal? Do they accept your help? Do they themselves and their emotions, like say for instance, something could happen, they find, God forbid, a dead baby and all of that. Do they accept your help?
So they do have their own internal peer support team, which they rely on. They do have that. So, but without breaking any confidentiality, I will say one of the biggest compliments, I think, as a behavioral health provider, because we have trauma therapists that work at Family Service beyond the GO team, is to have a police officer come to you or to have their family members come to you is a really big compliment. And we have had that happen. So.
Thank you. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Majority Leader, all set?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much.
Let the record reflect that President Pro Tem Correa is present. Councilman Espinal, you have a question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Margaret, Sarah, and Mr. Cedric Conley. Cedric, it's nice to have you back in Providence. I guess I was not the only one that said to you, you will not stay away, you'll be coming back. So it's great to have you again.
Yeah, thank you.
I was aware of some of the services by Family Service, but I was not aware of this relationship with the police department. And listening to you and describe what it is, it's good to know. And I'm very happy that it exists. Now, so you're more like a referral agency for the police department, like when the police responds to this call, they'll refer some of the people to you, and then you take it from there, or do you respond with the police?
We respond with the police, so it's both, but the majority is we respond with the police. So we have liaisons that ride along every day. Again, go to roll call and respond to those situations every single day, and then we have an on-call system that responds 24/7, 365.
Any instances where, or what's the policy? Do you not respond unless you have a police officer with you? Is there any instances where you actually respond yourself because it's a familiar call, it's a safe nature, that at any instance that you feel that you actually can handle this yourself?
I'll let Sarah answer that specific to the police because it's around how we would like to expand. We as an agency have an emergency system where we respond to the community, whether it's other businesses, as well as the Providence schools use us quite a bit for emergency evaluations and emergencies. So we do have a team that can respond without the police, but within this police model right now, through the 911 system, those are the calls that we respond to. So Sarah can speak to that.
Yeah, for this particular Go team, it is always, we respond always in partnership with the police. So that could be Carla, who's our longest liaison. She could be riding in a car in Providence and something comes over the radio. We have a domestic at this address, is family service riding. She gets physically taken immediately to that scene of the crime and responds. Or if it's, let's say, 3 o'clock in the morning and there's a homicide or a domestic violence incident, the police call us and we respond within 15 to 30 minutes on scene with them. But we do have incidences where we sometimes follow people, which we wish we had more resources to do this with everyone longer term, where our liaisons might accompany somebody to court. Right? So if a child, for example, has to testify, so we will do that. And sometimes that is without the police, but the model really is partnership with the police.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, because we have been interested in interview with different agencies because we feel at this point it might be something that we need to implement. And we have had interview with agencies that they respond to like 20 or 30% of all police calls. When you talk about your expanding, is that something that you envision that perhaps at some point your agency might be able to individually respond to a lot of these calls?
We have actually, that's in our expansion, and we'd like to be able to do that. And I think the examples that Sarah gave, like the mom on the Ripta bus, that didn't need a police presence. It needed a social service intervention. But right now, the 911 is a system that individuals in the community know to call. And so it goes to dispatch and they dispatch police. So the colonel and I have met, we have talked, we know, and he agrees, and that there are some calls that could be diverted from dispatch to a social service response that we could triage without having police respond. So we look forward to being able to do that.
And if I heard right, you do all this at $180,000 budget?
Well, yes, we do this, what we do right now at a very limited budget with a dedicated staff that work a lot of overtime, and then we have to tell them they have to put that time on their timesheets. And they also, because they're just so dedicated, they'll work 7 days a week and not take vacations. So in order to expand it, we would need additional funding and additional members from the community.
Oh, absolutely. I just think it's impressive that you're able to do all this. With such a small budget. Yeah. Must be the chairman, the director of finance there. He really knows how to work those numbers. Mr. Chairman, so the last question is for you, sir. Did you know about these services and the relationship with the police?
I knew some because unfortunately I was there way back when and before. So that's why we've been having these conversations in the committee, because I thought it was important to bring all these groups in, because there's a lot of relationship with the police. And man, so there's a lot of, I'm gonna say, I'm glad Family Services came tonight, and of course, Mr. Huntley came tonight, because it was also partly by design, because it's time to talk a little more. There's some refreshing news that they talked about, there's a lot of positive interaction that they've been having with the community and with the police, and working together for over a decade, almost 2 decades now. And I know lately we've just been hearing a lot of negative stuff. There's a lot of police departments across the country have big issues, and I'm not saying our police department's perfect, but what was always giving me great concern was the lack or devaluing the monumental effort of reform that has occurred in the city of Providence's police department in the past 15 to 20 years. By the way, by the creation and the help of organizations that we are listening to tonight, where, everybody was not giving any credit in general to what's been really going on in the city of Providence and how it has been trying to evolve and has been becoming a better police force. And by the way, not just by itself, but through the efforts of these organizations that are here tonight and the ones we're going to bring the next few nights too. And so I knew about them, and I thought it was important to help all of new council members and old council members. Not everybody's unfortunately, I've been on the council the longest now, and most council members weren't there when these folks showed up, and I'm not, and their monumental effort, and that's why. So yes, and I just have to. I think the presentation was so spot on, because there's a lot of positive things happening, in a sense, to help our communities. And I'm gonna very quickly say, on behalf of my community, because my community, by the way, receives 30% of their services. I don't know if you look at the map, 02909. So I represent one of the poorest communities in the city, just like you, Councilman Espinal. I don't represent folks I don't represent the 1%ers. I don't represent the top earners of the city of Providence, state of Rhode Island. I represent people who have a lot of serious needs. So I, during my experience, have interacted and saw the good work these folks have done, and with them and with the police department. And by behalf of my community, they've just been very positive impact. By the Institute for Nonviolence, I don't know how many times they were called in to my Hartford housing complex. We had some serious issues and troubles there. And they were there on the scene, helping the families and the kids. And I said it before, I'm being a broken record, the number one client we have in the Providence Housing Authority are single moms with families. That's the number one client we have there. By the way, the most vulnerable population in the city of Providence is in the Providence Housing Complex, in my neighborhood, Hartford Housing Complex, the largest public housing complex in the state of Rhode Island. And our number one client are single moms with children, the most vulnerable people. So I've seen the good work they've all done, and I've seen the good work the police have done. And that's why I'm kind of I'm just so pleased. I didn't want to say anything. I want them to speak because unfortunately people get, they feel it's sometimes more political, it's hyperbole, but let's hear from the folks that actually are out there in the field, are working with the police, and have. I think it's so great. She talked about how it has evolved. It's become a better police department. And it's kind of funny, if I may say, that of everything that Star was with us last week, they were actually, if you think about what Star did, their beginnings is actually what this GO team's all about. Star began almost like a GO team process, and then now finally turned into a bigger process this June of this year. Family Services actually they've been doing that process for 15 years, and working with numerous questions were answered. I remember they said they were involved with the police on a daily basis. They show up at the police calls. They have direct contact with the chief of police. 911 is a critical connection. The police force itself has changed dramatically, and there's an acceptance of it where let's get Family Services out there. Let's bring them in. Let's have them help us with the situation. So all the things we've been talking about with these other organizations, talking about what's going on, we have a lot of that already built in Providence. So I thought this is actually a good time now to start shifting, saying, hey, you know what? Look what they're doing with $180,000. Think about that for a second.
Exactly.
By the way, that is probably one of the most efficient models I've seen in all of city government, and then maybe because they're not in city government, but you get, so I'm going to wait for, I got some follow-up questions, but I know I kind of spoke a little, but I just think it's great to hear what they have to say, so I apologize if I said too much.
I'm just to finish up, and you're located on Eddy Street, am I correct?
Yeah, we have offices on the corner of Eddie's and Thurber's, in 9 Pleasant Street, in the Mount Hope section, and 55 Hope Street in the Fox Point section. But our main office, where my office is corner of Eddie and Thurber's.
So you're in my ward. Welcome to my
am.
community. Yes.
Yes, I am.
And also as well as the Institute on Nonviolence.
That's right.
I'm very fortunate to have you both. So thank you so much, and I applaud your effort, and I thank you for bringing this information to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have President Pro Tem Correa, then Councilwoman Ryan. President Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be, I want to thank Margaret, Sarah, and Cedric for the work that they do. Margaret mentioned going back to the Chuckstone Avenue substation. I remember going back 15 years when we built that building, and we had the substation was had different people in there working at the counter, addressing community concerns when people come in, kids came in. We've had some good people work there. One of the young ladies left and went to work for Family Services, Audrey. I don't know if she's still working there, but Audrey was one of our persons there. And then we had Jean. We had a ton of programs that Family Services offered, and then, like anything else, the money goes away, and those programs also go away. But we had a good working relationship. We still do. As the finance chairman mentioned, the 02909, I also represent a section of that. And, we utilize Family Services and the Institute before things get out of hand, even before the police or the court systems get involved in it. We try to bring Family Services and the Institute and everybody to work with the families, and we've done that a lot. I can name handfuls of our residents that we helped, as well as in Manton Heights as well. We've done a lot of those programs. I'd like to see a lot of that stuff come back. I remember, working with Family Services at the substation, and we used to do a new shoe drive for the neighborhood kids when they went back to school. We had barbers come in and we cut hair for the kids, their haircuts before they went on Chuckstone Avenue in front of the substation with the police officers and Family Services and all that. So there were a lot of good things that we had working with Family Services, and I think that what we need to do is try to get some more money somehow and get it into this so that we can bring back all these good things and let everybody work together as we did in the past. And again, Cedric, I think I told you that when I gave you the can of stuffed peppers, that you would be back. So, welcome back, buddy. Look forward to working with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Vice Chair Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had my hand up for quite some time, ever since Cedric was chatting. So thank you for recognizing me. What I wanted to say was first, welcome to Cedric. He is a member of the 5th Ward. Proud that he, actually your service to the children of Providence for so many years has been tremendous. And I was very excited to see you be chosen to lead the next chapter in the Institute of Nonviolence. I think you're going to do a great job. And very happy to see you there, because you certainly appreciate and understand the importance of partnerships, working with people and serving the community. So great pick. And I wish you well in that regard. I actually wanted to follow up, Mr. Chair, on a couple of earlier questions that I had relative to the funding for Family Services. You had stated that your budget generally is about $180,000 right now. How has that changed over time? What was your budget when you first started, and how has your organization changed over time? family service question. Thank you. Whoever wants is able
So
to
I guess
answer.
I'll start and then Sarah can chime in. So when we first started the Go Team, we were funded by a grant of just about $95,000 from the Rhode Island Foundation to get the training with Yale Child Study Center. And then they gave us our first grant, which is about, I think about another 100,000 to get started for that first year. Again, that was also 16 years ago, 15 years ago. So it was 100,000 is a little different now too. So, and then through the years, we were able to get some federal grants. And how our organization has changed is that as we learned from the Go Team and what the needs are in the city of Providence and families, we understood that we had to be a better organization about the impact of trauma. We also had to be better at the impact of domestic violence, also to learn how to do restorative practices. So we've developed all these different programs, and through grant funding and through federal funding and through some state funding, including funding from DCYF as well as BHDDH, we've been able to develop a really large array of trauma services that Sarah talked about that people can have access to if they're participants of the Go Team. So our agency is about a $20 million agency, but the Go Team, again, is a very lean program within that array of services. And so the funding has gone up and down over the years. At 1 year, it was zeroed out. We had to carry it for about 3 months. So we have been lucky, though, with the VOCA Community Development Block Grant, as well as additional funding from the city council with the 25,000 that we got this past year in order to respond to families in crisis in the city. And Sarah, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, and I will just also add that the VOCA funding that comes down through the feds, we never really know how much it will be. And this year, and there's a variety of victim service agencies that pull from that pool. The Institute also gets VOCA dollars for some of the work that they do. And this year, that funding is considerably less than it was last year. So, we don't know how that will impact us personally or the Go Team. But so year to year, you're always kind of crossing your fingers that we'll be able to fund it at the same level. But we have, as Margaret said, it's been up and down, but we have increased the staffing pattern because there's such a huge need in the city of Providence and its residents. You know, we could just respond to calls all day and all night long. It is a very lean budget. We do a lot with very little.
So what I'm trying to get at, so your startup was $100,000 plus 95,000 from the Rhode Island Foundation. So 195 was your startup
yes,
budget.
but that was over a 2-year period. So the first year was really training, planning, working with the police department on protocols and how we were going to respond and doing a pilot. And then the second year was full implementation.
Okay, and that how much staff did you have at that startup level?
1 staff member and an on-call team.
And that was for a children's response unit?
Children's response, yes, was responding to children that were either victims or witness of violence.
Okay, so when did you ramp up? You said that was a startup pilot, and then you quickly realized that you needed, that the need was great and you wanted to expand your service. When did that start? In year 3, kind of
really,
4, 5?
Yeah, really year 3, 4. I mean, we got called on a few calls. Can you just come to this call? Because we don't know what to do with this family. Can you just come to this call? We have an elderly woman who's really anxious and upset and confused. Can you help with that? So, and then we got more and more of those. Can you just come to this one? And we realized that there was a pattern and there was basically a need that was not being met. So we expanded the model.
So the police, was it the police department or police officers that you were beginning to have, a relationship with, understanding the levels of service, began to rely upon you more as time went on?
Yes.
And those early days, did you meet with the police at the same, with the same frequency that you meet with them now?
Yes, and actually the first couple of years, I think we met even more intensively. And because of the level of implementation and trust that we had to build. And we spent a lot of time doing trainings together as well. And I do want to mention the colonel. He was a lieutenant commander in Oneyville at that time. And he was one of the key ones that really helped the program grow, because he was the one that would say, you need to come to this community meeting, Margaret. You need to meet these folks. You need to help me mediate this meeting between these neighbors. So he would really extend the model as well. And he really helped us design it to what it is today, long before he was colonel.
Did your service need grow with the increased focus on community policing, would you say? Or was it a growth because of partnership relations? Community policing, partnerships?
Both.
Both.
But you
Yeah,
needed to
I
have a
would say so,
community
too.
policing lens. When you say Cedric, in order to.
I said same thing, both. It's both. I think Providence is in a very unique situation because for the last 20 years, we've been, community policing has been the focus. And we are, I believe that we are ahead of the curve in Providence. And so funding organizations like NBI and family services and others that are on the ground, boots on the ground, doing that work, making those connections, providing information, resources, is critical to continuing that work. And I have to give, the praise to the colonel as well. As it didn't start when he was the colonel, it started prior to that. And I think he's been a tremendous asset. So for the last 20 years.
Cedric, can I ask about your funding? Do you know what your budget is?
I can't give you numbers, and I won't even pretend to give you numbers at this point. But that's why I framed it as I'd like to come back and give you some very specific numbers.
We gave you some short notice, and we really appreciate you being here, being part of the conversation. It's extremely important to us. And then thank you. Oh, one more question to Family Services on your grants. Is there a matching component to your grants? The VOCA grant, is there a required in-kind contribution?
Yeah.
Answer that.
Yes, the answer is yes. For the VOCA funding that we get, we do have a 20% match, I believe, which is also, and that can't be federal dollars. There's all restrictions around that. So we have that. And we can't take our full indirect rate either. So yes, so we're often operating.
So where do you get that 20% from? Where do you get your match from?
So a variety of places.
Does CDBG qualify as a match?
Yes, actually CDBG, we just got that with my, that's recent. We used to not be able to use that, but Michael Hogan at the Public Safety Administration has authorized that. So that's been very helpful for our match. Yes,
okay, I was just questioning that one because I figured you had to have a match and I couldn't imagine where you were getting it from. Last thing I want to say is I want to commend the chairman of this committee. This has been a difficult, long, and arduous task, and you have been absolutely on the money, inviting people to have open discussions in a transparent way. I know that Councilwoman Harris has been very, very helpful. I know that I've been in your presence with Councilwoman Harris and other council colleagues, meeting with a number of groups, the police department, to try to understand what services are available, what resources the city of Providence already has. And I'm just, I heard about all of the depth of the services that you provide. I didn't understand the funding sources. So this meeting was extremely helpful, Mr. Chair. But more importantly, I'm just going to close with, the chairman brought in cahoots, he brought in STAR, and it was, when he offered the resolution, it was a cahoots-like, because from, I guess, what I understand, cahoots, was like a heralded, initial model. And we wanted to talk to them because they were heralded as being the first, the best, whatever, the biggest, the longest. And we got them in, we got to ask our questions, and we were concerned about, one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that they weren't meeting or debriefing with the police. on a regular basis. That to me was a red flag, because I said to myself, how do they improve their service if there's no direct partnership with the police? And then when STAR came in, I saw, and they stated that their program was an evolution, and that they looked at cahoots, and they basically developed their program on, improving upon, some of the things that they saw with cahoots. So it was great to have that presentation, and I want to thank the chairman for making sure that we got them and not only had conversations in a room, but had open conversations in public for everyone to hear and to understand what works and what conversations have been happening. We've also had conversations with the police department as well that really sang your praises, quite honestly, and talked about the relationship. So I personally, as a councilwoman, was not aware that you were meeting with the police, and part of the command. I know that the command staff has meetings and they have weekly meetings. I was not aware that, the Institute Family Services were meeting with the police on a weekly basis. So that has come out of this discussion. I think it's really important. I'm troubled. I'm very impressed by the services you provide. I'm troubled that you're doing all that good work and you're funded largely by grant dollars that you got to chase every year. So we need to do a better job here. Again, Chairman, thank you for taking the lead on this. Thank you, Councilwoman Harris. You've been right there along the way too. So good work, and I'm just really impressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to Ellen Sanar, we have Councilwoman LaFortune would like to ask a question. Councilwoman, are you there?
I'm here.
Right. You have a question?
Yeah, a few comments. Thank you so much, Chair, for bringing all these organizations in, and thank you, Councilwoman Harris, as well, for working with the chair. As you know, I've been coming to almost all of these meetings and collecting data, and also been talking with Ellen's team, Healthy Communities, as well as the policy department, because one of the things that we recognize, and wonderful to see you, Cedric, one of the things that we recognize is that there are a lot of wonderful organizations within the community that are doing outreach work, that are doing some type, various forms of intervention work, from family services, which the one in my ward I'm very active with. In fact, every year I go in and take an AIDS test. I've supported a lot of their initiative and volunteered with them. And so we see that. So one of the things that we have been doing, as you guys are bringing in all of these groups, is that we've been meeting, and I invited a bunch of experts within the community, including Ellen's team and the policy team. Cedric, I'm going to follow up with you. We were meeting with PJ from the Institute, because I've gone out on ride-alongs with PJ and Juan, and I've seen the work that they've done. I've also gone out on ride-alongs with the police department. And so what we did was I created a chart to list out all of the various nonprofit organizations that are doing intervention crisis work, their mission, their vision, and their framework, their funding source, et cetera. And what we're hoping to do is to create a citywide intervention type of framework. Because what's happening right now is that there's some wonderful work that's being done, but there's different entities, and the police department is working with various groups in the city, which is great. But what is the key contact person when it is time, when there is some sort of intervention or crisis management situation? Because family services is not with the police department 24/7. So they're not going out in the middle of the night, right? And so when we spoke yesterday, you had mentioned that the shift starts at 3 p.m. But I wasn't clear if you guys were actually going out 24 hours per day.
Councilwoman, we do go out 24 hours a day. So we do have staff that ride along on certain hours, but we do have an on-call team, and oftentimes we work much longer than, so we go out 24 hours a day, 365.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So you guys go out 24 hours a day. You have United Way, 211. They provide 24-hour service, connecting people with resources. So there's again a lot of there's wonderful work that's being done. So hopefully what we hope to do with the Healthy Communities team, and one thing I will say about Ellen's department is that this type of work and looking at different models and really trying to create a structure for the city, she actually, her group has been meeting for a few years now. They have a Healthy Communities initiative. They're meeting with members of the school department, various communities, entities. They're meeting monthly, and this has been happening for a few years. I've gone to some of these meetings, and they're doing some wonderful work and also trying to figure out how to streamline some of these processes. So hopefully what we hope to do at the end of this is create some sort of framework for the city so that we have a citywide model, and it may be a model where there's a call that's made, there's a crisis intervention person that goes in, and that person works with multiple organizations based on whatever that individual needs is, whether it's behavioral need, whether it's alcohol use or drug use, whether it's mental health illness, whether it's homelessness, but some sort of mechanism to be able to easily connect folks to these various entities. But again, the missing link is that universal framework that everyone can follow, so that when there is some sort of crisis intervention, we have a way of addressing everyone's needs. And one of the things that the community has said, and I want to make sure that we're not forgetting this, is that whatever is created, their fear is that, or they don't want it to necessarily be under the purview of the police department. They want it to be separate because of the relationship between the community and the police. And granted, our police department, although I'm from Providence, I've lived in 2 major cities. I've lived in Miami, Florida, and I've lived in Philadelphia. And I will say that our police department, some of the issues that we see throughout the country, our police department has come a long way. And, they're doing some wonderful work. They're looking at the gaps. They're trying to figure out how to better support the community and increase community policing. But the tension still exists, because all it takes is for one negative incident, and whatever has happened, it triggers the trauma that people have experienced, and they're real. And unfortunately, structural racism exists, bias, internalized racism, institutionalized racism, and the media has a way of framing things. And so it's just really important that we have some sort of citywide framework, and that we can ensure that all people are being connected to the right service. And again, thank you for bringing in all of these organizations. I think one thing that we have not talked about enough is services for our veterans, as well as services for victims of assault, or human trafficking.
I just want to thank you, Councilwoman. I think those are all really good points. I will just mention that I think there is some existing framework, so I'd like to also look at building out the current framework, because there is a triage that both I know the Institute does, as well as Family Service does.
Absolutely.
And in relationships with all the domestic violence agencies, with all the mental health agencies, with our homeless agencies, with other grassroots organizations, in connections in the community. So while Family Service has a large array of services, also our job is to make sure that we have all those connections in the community, make sure that we can match up in the moment, in that time, or as soon as possible the next morning, and walk that family through. And that's what we do now. So I think that there is some of that framework, and we should be proud of that here in Providence, that we have. And how do we build upon that success?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why, sorry, Chair.
Thank you. If I could, I want to, because I know it's getting a little late, so I want to give Ellen Sanara an opportunity to give us a quick little update where she is. And then we'll go from there. Ms. Sanara, do you want to give us a little update of where you folks are? And
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both to Family Service and the Institute for presenting tonight. I know I've been listening intently to a lot of the Finance Committee meetings over the past month or so, and especially as Cahoots and STAR, the Cahoots program and the STAR program both presented. they were talking about the services and then the work that they do. And I kept thinking, oh, we have an organization that does that here. Oh, wait, no, that organization does that. Oh, we have 30 different organizations that could do that. And so I'm really pleased that we're able to start showcasing, learning, and sometimes showing off about the services that do exist in the city of Providence. I think, they're often on their own and doing the hard work. I know we're hearing a lot about thin budgets and grant funding and stuff like that. So from our perspective, my office, we're the Healthy Communities Office. We're a public health policy and advocacy office. Providence does not have public health authority. And so really a lot of those functions, they're held at the state level. But my office is here to provide, a focus of health policy for Providence or on behalf of Providence residents. My office works on everything from healthy eating and active lifestyles to substance use disorder, support. We hold many councils, or we manage many councils. In particular, we manage a council that primarily has membership from behavioral health organizations. And we're very, very grateful for Family Service, who in a non-COVID time physically hosts us at their office. So I think for us, we're really trying to step back and think about this from sort of a large scale systems perspective. Obviously, to Margaret's point, 911 is the first number that people call. You learn that as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old. I'm teaching my kids that right now, right? That's the trusted number that people go to. And that's great, right? We want that easy number to remember, so that when crisis is happening, people go there. And so I do think there is a strong, it's important to be thinking about this system as it relates to public safety at large. I know there have been conversations with EMS. They serve a tremendous amount of behavioral health related calls. Oftentimes things present as a non-behavioral health call, and in turn they are. It presents as a physical health emergency, and in turn it is a behavioral health issue. Our EMS and our police teams are on the front line of the overdose epidemic here in Providence and the state. So making sure that that programs and interventions also speak to the human experience, and that people do still call 911. But I think, what you're hearing is that it doesn't always need a police intervention, or there might be an opportunity for a handoff to a social service provider or a clinician or a behavioral health specialist who's best situated to respond to that. So, we're looking at lessons learned from Cahoots and STARS. We're also trying to take inventory of the programs that are in existence here and the service providers that are existent here. It would be, foolish for us to dream up a model that no one can actually respond to or partner with. I think what you're hearing is that these are long-term relationships and long-term interventions. My office works quite a bit with social service agencies and behavioral health agencies and outreach teams. And I would say one of the hardest things for a nonprofit is that uncertainty of funding. It's very destabilizing for an organization. It's very destabilizing for the services that they provide. It can be very destabilizing for the people who are actually doing that work. I think you're hearing about a tremendously dedicated workforce in social service provision. These are the people that are up late at night thinking about their clients, who are there at 2 a.m, who aren't putting down the hours that they're working on their time cards because they care so much about this. But that makes it very difficult to maintain something. So I think when we're talking about an intervention like this, we really need to be thinking about investments of multiple years and not just one-off commitments. And then something that I care deeply about is monitoring and evaluation. So we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is in constant, you're constantly talking, it's an iterative process. What you're hearing from partners here is that they're constantly tweaking the system, or not the system, but the work that they do. They're in constant conversation. They're always trying to do process improvement. What the issue is today might not be the issue in 5 years, but you still need a system that's able to improve upon itself. So that constant process improvement, monitoring ourselves, monitoring, I think in terms of government, monitoring our contractors. This is a type of work that would go out in an RFP if we were to fund something in an enhanced way. And so how are we monitoring the contractors that we're putting out there, and making sure that we're evaluating ourselves well too. So I'll stop there. I'm very passionate about this work. I'm very proud of the partners that we have. I am eager to work with council members on this, and I look forward to a partnership on this. I think we're all actually going in the same direction. I found myself nodding a lot as you're all asking questions about money and evaluation and relationships. And so I think, having us all be on the same page, I think we're getting there. And I invite you to, come to our council member meetings or council meetings for behavioral health. I'm always just floored by the work that our community partners do with very little. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilwoman, Deputy Majority Leader Harris. You have her?
I'm finally off mute. Sorry, I had to come outside. It was too cold in my place, so I had to move outside. Okay, so no, it's warmer out here. Ellen, thank you for that presentation. It sounds like, even with the whole concept of what we're talking about, it sounds like we're asking our police department to do some type of reform. Would you say that's a fair word to use?
Yeah, I think that, we are trying to solve a lot of public health problems with a police force. And, that's an inappropriate, in my experience, an inappropriate use of our energy. I'm always going to be biased. I'm a public health person. I think we could all solve the world's problems if we all took a public health lens to how we do our work. But yeah, I think, we want to make sure that we're responding to resident issues and preventing resident issues really with a human-centered experience. And making sure that the folks that are responding in a way that is culturally appropriate, that is actually responsive and trained. You hear a lot about trauma-informed response. There's a clinical way that we want people to be responding. There's a trained way that we want people to be responding. And also we want to make sure that we're not putting undue pressure on people who aren't there to respond to those issues, who aren't trained to respond to those issues either.
Yeah, but and that again sounds like we have to start looking at things a little different than what we've been doing inside the police department. So I would use the word reform, and that meant that the 911 would have to be carefully thought out about how that would work. Relationships have to be very strong between the Providence Police Department. And Ellen, the only reason I'm using that is because we're still struggling with PARA, which is their brand new partner that they don't want to accept right now. And so, again, that's why I wanted to say the family service, it's good to hear about, and nonviolence institutes, it's good to hear about trust. That's one thing about Rhode Island, it's all about trust, here. And that has been a problem, with the Providence Police, is like making those relationships real. And because these relationships have been real all along, I think it's a better opportunity for us to look at what we would call reform in different ways, like from the inside, and what Nonviolence Institute could probably step in and do more of, because it's a form of trust. And one of the things we know that when Nonviolence Institute are out there, people know who they are, right? And it's again about trust. I witnessed sometime when even the police try to get somebody off the ground, and those people are like hesitant sometimes because, should I get up? If I get up, do I go to jail? You know, all of these things become like a sort of distrust. And again, we have to think about the human lives and what we're up against right now. And the fact that we're also looking at this crisis is not only a health crisis, but it's an economic crisis, and things are going to get worse. And usually when things get worse, people find a way of escaping, whether it is self-medicating or drinking. You know what I'm saying? So we have to really step up those services. I appreciate everybody's interest around that, because I can see things even getting worse with human lives. So I appreciate your thinking around. It's very important that people are healthy and they feel all right when they are approached by someone who is supposed to be a public servant, including myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Deputy Majority Leader, thank you, because your response and your question actually made me think that, you know, we have a whole ecosystem of partners that work unrelated to public safety, you know, and we want to be supporting them as well. You know, we are seeing increased opioid overdose deaths right now. We're seeing, you know, increased EMS runs. We sort of saw depression when COVID was at its height in the past, you know, in sort of the springtime. I know, Deputy Majority Leader, you've talked a lot about alcohol. That is absolutely one of these underlying quiet substance use disorders that we have that we don't talk enough about. And I know that, you know, an important resource that we lost was the Recovery Navigation Program at Emmanuel House. So,
That's right.
You know, part of the conversation is, do we also have places where people can then go and get treatment and recovery services, maintain those treatment and recovery services? Do we have the support for things that, you know, seem kind of pedestrian and benign, but are actually some of the strongest undercurrents in our substance use disorder landscape?
Thank you. Deputy Majority Leader, do you have a follow-up?
I'm all set, Chairman. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to say, Ellen, you're so calming. You should attend more Finance Committee meetings. I've been listening to you, and you've got me nice, very calm. So thank you for that.
I'm going to tell my kids some bedtime stories soon, so I'll just transition into that.
There you go. My question really is a follow-up on, you spoke on with great knowledge about the different resources that are provided by Family Services and the Institute. What I'd like to understand is, how do you interact with those agencies? What is your involvement and how do you work with them? What is your charge as it relates to those partners, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I don't have any sort of licensing or governmental oversight over any of our partners. So, you know, Family Service can speak to a greater extent about this, but there are licensing clinical relationships that they have with state agencies. So that is not the relationship that we have. I would say a lot of the relationship is around convening and understanding gaps. My office is sort of a thinly resourced office as well. And so we're often trying to advocate for them or support them and make connections and linkages. There are times where my office does get grant funding, and so we really rely on our partners to do the work. I think what you've heard is that, you know, we have really great depth of knowledge and experience in our community partners, and my office tries to make sure that we're capitalizing on that. And so wherever possible, we are putting our grant dollars out to community-based organizations. So, you know, once a month, for example, we convene a coalition of folks that work on substance use disorders, behavioral health, sort of outreach services, things like that. And so it's a place where those organizations can tell me what they're doing and how they're, you know, operating, what their gaps and opportunities are, but also, you know, work with each other. And I would say, you know, our organizations are all working with each other. And, you know, I often think about the landscape of services, and I know there are times where they'll, you know, they're subcontracting with each other and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that answers
it does
the
actually,
question, but
it does actually. It gets right to the heart of my question, which now is, so you look at the whole landscape of service, using your term. Do you have a gap analysis as it relates to you know, this crisis that we're all talking about, mental health crisis and homelessness and the services that we're looking to fill right now? Have you completed a gap analysis relative to the partners that we already work with?
That's a really good question, and it's actually a very hard question to answer because, you know, and this is part of a public health perspective. You define what the problem is, and then you try and use a human-based approach to solve for that problem with the resources that you have. What you're talking about, you know, the things that were homeless, people experiencing homelessness, housing insecurity, substance use disorders, behavioral health, either in a crisis situation or just sort of a chronic issue, relationship issues within a house or within, you know, partners. Those are complex, those are societal. I think to Majority Leader Harris, when you see changes in economic situations, you see a lot of pressure on people. So I think you're asking the question, you're asking the right question, and you're asking the hardest question to answer, because it really depends. If we're solving for people experiencing homelessness, that is a thing. If we're solving for a behavioral crisis intervention to make, you know, to support public safety, that's a different response. If we're talking, and I know in many of these conversations, folks have asked about outreach services, about you know, harm reduction services and things like that, then that's another story to solve for. So, and then to add to that, and sort of my I don't mean to doom and gloom us, but even if you are making the connections of someone who needs help to the potential person who can help them, it doesn't mean that that resource is there. So we have major issues in insurance coverage, in service provision, and so I'm not answering your question specifically. I'm just giving you more questions to answer. But if we're solving for trying to reduce the engagement of police in non-police related issues or in behavioral health issues, then we need to be thinking about the way in which we respond now as police officers and how we could potentially take that offline and give that responsibility to someone who is better suited to do that work.
So with that lens, have you produced a gap analysis?
Yeah, so I think that I go back to the 911 triage call. And so, you know, we have dispatch teams, and so who's making the decision about who's responding to the issue? You know, you're hearing that if police are responding, then family service is going to be engaged with them. And so that's one potential mechanism. You have to think about EMS. And then I know, Chairman, you've talked about sort of this fourth, I need a bigger screen, a fourth component of public safety that really truly is a non-traditional public safety response. And I think that's what's missing, and there's a completely separate response that is outside of the public sphere or public safety sphere. So that maybe that fourth wedge of we know that someone's in crisis, or we know that there's a response, and we know that they don't have a medical issue. We know that they don't need a police intervention. They truly, it's the person on a bus, right? It's the person on a bus who really needs help, and it does not involve public safety. It doesn't need to involve public safety. But
but I think, but here's the thing, there's a devaluation of the term public safety. It is public safety. The fourth unit would be addressing a public safety need. It's not necessarily, public safety is about the safety of the public and providing these types of support systems, right? You have a fire problem, you have an ambulance issue, you have a police issue. The idea is the fourth tranche unit would be that you have a social service and responding unit. So it's
I agree with you.
It's all in the umbrella of public safety. And I know it's, and just, unfortunately, the politics lately has kind of changed definitions of what these terms mean. But the public, our job is to make sure the public is as safe as possible. And safe doesn't necessarily mean police safety. It means fire safety. It means ambulance safety. It means all those aspects, right? And so
and I'm sorry, I don't disagree with you.
I just want to make sure I just want to make sure everyone understands where I'm coming from, because I view it as that's an obligation of government. That's the umbrella. Now, the other piece is what you mentioned, which is the other kinds of social services that don't necessarily go under that public safety emergency unit, which is different, which is like, you mentioned like if there's other issues that potentially happen that you have to provide social services, But I'm sorry, so I wanted to interject. I was hoping, you see what I want to make sure I want to make sure my position is explained well enough.
Yeah, no, and I'm sorry, Chairman. I do understand. I think I was using public safety as it's currently thought of right now. So, police, EMS, the sort of like uniformed rank and file definition of public safety.
The goal here is try to evolve the term of public safety. And how you evolve it is, in my mind, a fourth tranche, which is, in theory, a emergency social service unit. If 911, listen, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars across the country to make 911 the knee-jerk, the gut reaction call from everybody, even little kids like 2 or 3 years old, you say 911, right? So it clearly is the clearinghouse of the first responders. So it's another tranche of a first responder who isn't in a police uniform, isn't in a fire uniform, and isn't in an ambulance uniform, but in a social service uniform. And what we learned from STARS and CAHOOTS is like, jeans and T-shirts, and like, a police, a radio. So if something does escalate, they do have the other additional safety. Like if a fire breaks out, the fire comes, if they need an ambulance, right? And that isn't it about making, when we talk about this word holistic, isn't that actually adding another component to actually creating a true holistic approach to actually providing safety to the public? That's kind of how I was viewing it. And I don't mean to interject, but I view like, in family services, and I think this is interesting, and their presentation tonight, and I know my council colleagues have been following, it's interesting. We heard the CAHOOTS model, which is this very evolved model, has been around a long time. Then we heard the STAR model, which I thought was very interesting. For 5 or 6 years, they were creating themselves and doing all the things that family services is doing right now.
Right.
Right? And then they said, we evolved, and we evolved this June of 2020 to the next level, which is kind of CAHOOTS, but remember, they handle a bigger city, by the way. Right? STAR represents what, Denver? Am I correct? A major city, a bigger city than Eugene, Oregon, and the other smaller city. So they understood that they did these steps to learn what would be the right size kind of emergency social service. And in my view, family services as the pre-STAR. They're pre-STAR. They've been doing it for 15 years, what STAR was doing for 5 years. So I want to advocate in that sense that when people say there is a framework, we have a model, we have data. We have 15 plus years of data from all these organizations, and by a particular organization that had I like the whole GO team, that's great. The GO team, by the way, STAR, CAHOOTS model, and we've had it always here. And what I thought was interesting is that if the next step would be to evolve it, whether it's family services or not, it seems to me that there's a lot of data and information that family services, and of course, in Institute of Nonviolence, can give us and glean from to say, maybe we do evolve it to the next level. And I thought it was very interesting, $180,000 what they're providing, right? And what we could get at the next level. And I've seen the benefits. And some of my colleagues, I know that, I've seen it for decades. And it's just because I was there at the Genesis. Councilwoman Harris has been at the Genesis a lot of this stuff. Like, we were there. So, I I've seen that process. And I think one thing I think is very important, and I'm mentioning it because of what Mr. Huntley said and the ladies said from Family Services. Police interaction is an important component. And here's the interesting thing. It's kind of funny. When I was growing up, right? You grow up with something you didn't understand or you were afraid of, like that house. There was a house on the street you didn't like, right? It was scary. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? Then one day, they always took the house. So you said, don't go near the house. Don't go near the house. Don't talk to the house. Then one day you go trick-or-treating. You open the door and you find it's a sweet old lady who lives in that house. And you get to know that sweet old lady. My concern is the idea to disconnect the public safety units, police, fire, and other ones from this type of my mind, emergency safety service unit, is us doing just the opposite. How are the people in my community going to get to know the lady in that house or the officer in that house if we never open the door? And the idea, if we keep on saying, don't go to that house, don't be part of that house, don't ring that bell, how are we going to, and then how do we get to know them and they get to know me? Now, in general, I've had numerous community meetings, by the way, during this COVID stuff, numerous crime watch meetings, and I'll tell you something, my constituents, and I don't represent any 1%ers, folks. I don't represent the top 1%. I represent people who are on the margin, a huge percentage. They're on the margin. They're struggling. They are not telling me that they want, and they're all races, colors, creed, everything, by the way. They're not saying to me, we want to disenfranchise ourselves from the police department. They're not telling me to get rid of the police department. They're telling me they want to make the police department better. They've seen the reform over the years, by the way, because my community was part of helping with that forming, right? Community policing. And I just, Colonel Clemens, he was my lieutenant when I first came out, so that's how long I know him. And I think it's important that we're getting so negative that we don't want to see the glass is half full when it is half full. And how can we then fill it to the top with all the positive energy? So I just want to say that I'm far more cautious the idea that we just should totally disconnect any type of program department or the other public safety, and it's because that seems to be counterintuitive in order for us to bring the police department and the men and women of the police into the fold, into the philosophy of the community, and want to be part of the community. I lived in the city when I was young. All police officers actually had to live in the city. So the dynamic was different. Because that officer would they would be off the job, they see a problem, they call it in. They were our neighbors. The lack of no longer, having to live in the city anymore, there's been a disconnect. By the way, with our teachers, a disconnect. We have teachers who live in South County, come to Providence, teach our children, and have no connection to my community. Fire people, city personnel. I say it all the time, there's pretty much practically only maybe 16 people that I know that live in the city of Providence. Me and my council colleagues and the mayor. And and I'm okay with it. I get where we are today, but I think it's about bringing those connections back together and magnifying them. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to commend the Family Services because they gave, for me, a fresher breath air, and Mr. Huntley, that there's been a lot of positive strides in the policing department and a lot in interaction with your organizations and with them trying to provide the services. I know, by the way, I know my community has claimed for and has needed and actually has used. By the way, by your own shot shows my community, and that's why I want to maybe say kind of how I'm viewing this, and I think it's something that we should embrace together, and hopefully magnify the positive stuff. But if we keep on saying that we don't want to go knock on that house, or don't want to let those other people in the conversation, that's counterintuitive to the idea of a holistic approach. That's just kind of my general, some of my views on that. I know the Vice Chair, Ryan, and then I'm gonna go from the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask Ellen about 211 services. While the chair was talking, I was Googling, health services, social services that are available in Rhode Island, and I'm just kind of looking through 211. I see they have a van. I see they have some wonderful services on social service support systems and I'm, opioid addiction recovery, safe housing. Just wonder what is their connection, if any, to the other social service providers in Providence?
So we're really lucky in Rhode Island to have United Way's 211. Actually, they're the other number that people think about when they.
That's why I thought of them when you were saying 911. Yeah. I said, oh, there's 211 too.
And I'd be remiss to not say 311 for constituent services, but 211 is really the clearinghouse for so many services. And so their staff, I know Angie Ancoma was able to present a few weeks ago about the work that her team does, but you can call them and they know a lot about a lot of things. And so they're staffed with many, or with people who speak many languages. They're the people who can help refer you to places. My understanding is they're really not a service provider. They're the linkage provider to the services that are in Rhode Island. I will say that during COVID, 211's what they do really stood out. People were trying to figure out where to get things. Many of you know about, for example, pandemic EBT. All of our public school students were receiving enhancements for meals missed. 211 is the place where people could call for questions. So to me, they're the clearinghouse of information for the state.
So in my mind, I'm just trying to figure out how everybody works together. Family Services, Institute for Nonviolence, they're more triage, immediate need services, work closely with the police. United Way are more on a network of long-term service providers are housed under that 211 umbrella. So it would be likely that Family Services might actually refer somebody out for long-term services to one of the United Way service providers? No?
Other way around. Yep. So 211 would be the place that you would call when you don't know who to call for something. So for example, we have a robust summer meals program in Providence. All of the state summer meals sites, 211 has that list. And so I could call up 211 right now and say, I live in this ward, this is my address. And someone from 211 would say, okay, here's the closest meal site. But someone could also say, hey, my kid's really struggling. I think there's some behavioral health issues. They'll sort of triage through some of the symptoms, and then their job is to help make those connections. So maybe Margaret or Sarah, you could speak better to how you work with 211 to explain that relationship.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody, after you respond to, we're going to be wrapping up in a couple minutes because it's getting late in the evening. It's only late now, so I don't want to be rude. So
sure. I can just Councilman. I could just briefly say that so 211 would be the place where they send us a large amount of referrals. So for behavioral health, for basic needs support, again. Most people call 911. For the people that know about 211, they might call 211, and then they triage it to us, the Institute, a whole host of other community agencies, depending on that need. And we actually subcontract with 211, and we do some of that work as well during this COVID crisis, providing information and support for people who are quarantining, who are positive with COVID. But they're You can call them and they'll point you in the right direction. So we receive a lot of referrals from them.
Very good, thank you. In my young years, I've always learned communication is the key to everything. We've learned a lot tonight, and I'm so thrilled that each and every one of you came and made a presentation. I've learned a lot from it. So thank you very much for being so open and honest with us. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I have no more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So can we just get a couple of housekeeping measures before we forget? The clerk said we have to make a motion to enter a couple of items into the record as exhibits. So could we have enter the family service multi-page PowerPoint identified as Exhibit 4, entered into the exhibit of our presentation this evening? Have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
All right, Vice Chair, second by... Nope, I don't see. I think I lost my councilman. Oh. Well, we dropped off, so...
We can just add that.
So we're going to add that item, and then we're also going to add at the next thing, the Exhibit 5, Mr. Mancini's debit service as percentage of budget, multi-page. We'll just add it in the next finance meeting. We'll do it in official. I want to thank everybody, by the way, this evening for participating. Mr. Huntley, we're going to bring you back. Family service. We're definitely gonna, we'd love to hear more from you, and we're gonna hear from other organizations the Providence Police Department works with. Thank you. I think it was extremely enlightening to learn what we're doing in Providence and some of the great things that we're doing right in Providence. So I want to thank you and thank Ellen Senar and her organization and the city, Mr. Mancini and everybody, and all the council members. Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. God bless. Be safe.